Welcome. I'm Tony Christ in Falls Church, Ismail Madni in Austin, Texas. And welcome to Sunshine and Transparency. It's March 1. Today, we're going to cover in a little bit more detail immigration. We did cover it a few weeks ago. Ismail and I are both sons of immigrants and from different generations. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to hear Ismail's view. Then I'm going to take it, and we're going to talk about recent crime increases. And we'll finish up the session with me outlining 4 points that I think ought to be implemented. And it's nothing less than a dramatic change of the immigration policies. And we'll end up with that. Also, next week, we have fatal gifts. These are government gifts. It's going to be a very interesting topic. We're going to we're going to introduce Paul Sarbane's warning to America. He's a Democrat senator from Massachusetts in 1990. What his warning was. The week after, we're going to go 2 weeks ahead. We're going to go down to Mexico. There are 2,000 Chinese working in laboratories with fentanyl in Mexico, not in China. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the derivatives, the opium wars in China last century, and what the Chinese are doing. They're killing Americans. We lost as many Americans last year as we've lost in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan combined in 1 year. Okay, we'll talk about that in 2 weeks from now. But right now, let's go to immigration. And Ismail, why don't you tell us what your current feelings are about immigration? Ismail has in the past advocated open borders. I don't know if he's still there, but I don't. But Ismail, why don't you take it and tell us anything you want? You can go back to your own experience, your father, and if you have a defined idea of what we should do, go ahead.
Sure, absolutely. And one other thing for today, just so folks are aware, the article is up. I'll just quickly share it. This is article number 24 on the Odyssey Investments website, The Immigrant. And if you haven't heard the story, if you haven't read the book Breadcrumb that Tony has written, it is the quintessential American story, in my opinion. So absolutely read the article this week. I am lucky enough to have met Mr. Christ Sr. I suppose he was he's very young, but he left an impression on me that almost 30 years since he passed still lasts for me as well. So I highly encourage and recommend folks to read this article. It's phenomenal, and read the book as well. It's terrific story.
You passed it on to that acquaintance, right? Hopefully, we'll get a movie out of it.
Yes, exactly. That would be ideal, because
that would be the home run.
Again, my opinion is right. Yeah, my opinion. I think very highly of your father. I was just very fortunate to have met him, and again, only as a child, but he left such an impression. And again, we've talked about it. He was an optimist.
Yeah, he was a
eternal
optimist of the Christian Holocaust. Now, that's a whole different topic. We're not going to discuss it today, but it actually existed. That's with a small h. It preceded the Jewish Holocaust, and it was largely in Turkey. But right now, let's focus on immigration. We're having
absolutely. Yeah. So my fundamental view on immigration is this. Today, right? And I think it can be interpreted as open borders, but there are a couple of issues we have. Birth rates are low. The immigration rate to this country has remarkably slowed down. Cato has statistics that we're missing between 2 to 4 million immigrants. We do not, and again, I'm in Texas. I speak with folks here about it. We do not have folks who are doing jobs that they were doing 5, 6, 7 years ago. Give you an example. Landscaper, local landscaping company. I'm very good friends with a large size operation. They've done work at our home. Asked them, like, hey, it's you and one other guy. What's going on? Why? Yeah, it's 2 of you. It's going to take you 2 weeks to do this. flat out, the gentleman said, he was, and this is a third generation company, we don't have enough people in America. Now, this is an anecdotal story, and I believe as a position of our nation, a position, a stated strategic goal, and maybe I'm thinking too much like an MBA here, but a stated strategic goal is by the end of this century, we need to have 500 million Americans.
Well,
500 million. And the way, let me finish the point on this here. One, we have the room. If you get off the coast, you'll see this is a largely uninhabited land, number one. We have the need, number two. Number three, a country that is either steady in population or declining, like Europe, like China, like Russia as well, will be a dying country in the long run. The entire Western world, Russia, and now even China is losing human talent and are projected to have dramatic population losses by the middle of this century, by the end of this century. We're the only ones who've actually stayed even in the developed world. And now India is, they still keep having babies, and that's a big reason why they keep their rise is happening. So to me, the system today, as it is established and set, it takes too long, far too long, to be able to legally get into this country, which incentivizes different avenues to get in this country. It is too complex. It requires lawyers. It requires thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars. It requires understanding laws that the lawmakers themselves don't understand. And it is having a negative impact on this country. So therefore, my position, and believe it or not, we are very close on the how we solve this problem. I think we're very close. I think overall your 4 points,
well,
I agree with for the most part.
Close,
but no, I think we're closer than you imagine. My point is, how do we accelerate it so that it's not right now, this past year, the fewest green cards issued on record. Fewest green cards issued.
Okay, let's
on record. This past year. I'm not done yet. Wait, hold on. Let me just finish this aspect of it. Our green card backlog to get through the backlog to legally come into this country right now will take decades to get through. Decades. We're not talking about a year or 2 years or 3 years. It will take decades. So think of the talent we're missing on that wants to come here. And that's my overall point. How do we turn this from a decades-long process, on average 12 to 15 years to legally immigrate, into a 10 to 12 day process at most?
Well, I don't think 10 to 12 days is in our interest.
I mean, I'd make it 10 to 12 minutes or hours if I could. I think 10 to 12 days is too long. Also, it should take
I think we need to know who we're letting in. And in your world, you and I don't agree on that. Laken Hope Riley, she's dead. Okay. And let's talk about Maduro, and let's talk about Castro. Castro emptied his prisons and his insane asylums and sent them over the border. Maduro's maybe doing the same thing. We've had a number of Venezuelans, incidentally, do not take anyone back. In other words, when we go to export somebody who's lying, which 96.5% are coming across the border, they don't take them back. So the whole thing with coming across the border and claiming that your life is in danger, the statistics show 96.5% are lying. They want to get quick entry. And of that,
and that's why I wouldn't have an asylum system or any of these different. Right. It's too complicated.
And he hit it right on the head. The asylum system, which was started out of America's generous heart, worried about people being persecuted in other parts of the world. It's being abused to death. That must change. And we'll talk about that later too, how it could change. But we've had a surge of Venezuelans come across recently. And I think it's, like I said, Maduro, the dictator who's of a communist country, who will not take anyone back, emptying his prisons much like Castro did. So I believe we need to know who's coming across. That's number one. I mean, Lake and Hope Raleigh, this guy was bad news since the day he got here. Almost every day, incidentally, an immigrant has committed a felony that we've heard of this week. There was another death. There was an assault and rape. There was a death of a 2-year-old. That's 3 days. And there were a couple of more incidents. Almost every day we're seeing that. There is a huge benefit to having immigrants. There's a shortage in certain areas of our labor force, and I'm not going to argue with Ismail that immigration helps mitigate that, but it doesn't. There also today are 100 welfare programs administered by the government. There are a lot of fractured families in America. There's a lot of children growing up without fathers. There's an awful lot of abortions in America annually that didn't exist 30, 40 years ago when it was socially taboo, like it is in most countries in the world right now. And there was much pressure, and there was an obligation. Fathers usually would at least pay alimony, if not support their children. And today we've grown a welfare system. The welfare system takes it over. The dad's relieved from any responsibility. And it leads really to instant poverty in America. If you want a sentence of poverty, just be in a single mom family. That whether you're black, white, green, or whatever, you'll be condemned to poverty if you don't have a mom and a dad. And that statistically comes through. Also, with violence, there's a very strong correlation with violence and absentee fathers in families. So there's a number of things going on. It's not just the need in certain areas of labor, which incidentally, if the economy recesses, that need can disappear next year. And I already think with all the announcements today on March 4th, the ISM and PMI announcements, it's heading right down, all of it. So the fact that we need labor can turn into, because economies don't stay in high demand like we have due to tremendous amount of stimulus we poured into the system, particularly after COVID, they don't stay in high demand, they go up and down. So I think it's essential that we need to know who came in. And I want to just give you some statistics on crime. If you go now, these are not complete statistics. These are U.S. Border Patrol criminal arrests for non-citizens at the border. So they don't count people that say officers arrest in New York City or in any town or city in the nation. But I think it's interesting to know in 2020, there were 2,438. In 2021, there were 10,763. In 2022, there were 12,028. Now, these are expenses. These aren't productive people if they're arrested, and they do have criminal records. In 23, it hit 15,267. Now, we've just completed 2 months in this year, and it's over 5,616. Now, if you want another somewhat troubling statistic, let's go to murders. Okay, murders from these illegal aliens that are apprehended by Border Patrol. Okay, in 2017, it was 3. In 2018, it was 3. In 2019, it was 2. In 2020, it was 3. Now we get to the surge. In 2021, Biden's first year, it was 60. In 2022, it was 62. Now in 23, it dropped to 29, but this year already, with 2 months, it's 14. You multiply that times 6 to get a year, and you're up to 70, 80. It would be a record. So
what is the rate compared to native born? The rate of murders for an illegal compared to native born?
Compared to what?
So what is the
I mean,
homicide rate
I'm only
convicted?
reading off one list. I don't have
Mhm,
a lot of statistics. I do know it is limited. These warrants for arrest for murder are limited to Border Patrol.
mhm.
It doesn't
And
that
the
doesn't mean
reason I asked
they
that,
were
I
the
just
only ones. Like this girl that was murdered in Georgia, Georgia Tech, in Georgia, at her college was murdered in the woods, and they were the local sheriff's office made the arrest. It was not Border Patrol. So I
right,
don't
yep.
think they're complete. Okay, and there's a whole assault and battery, uh, illegal drug possession is huge. It's gone from 400 to 300 up to 2,100 to 2,200 in the last under the Biden administration. Uh, Sexual offenses have jumped up quite a bit too. So there's a lot of cost to bringing in people that you don't know. Okay, and we really have forgotten about that because in immigration traditionally, when my dad immigrated, he couldn't get a certificate from the embassy. He was a butler to the Turkish ambassador, wanted to become a citizen, and they didn't want him to leave, so they wouldn't give him a certificate saying he was in good standing, and he was issued a deportation order, had to go to a court hearing, and it went on for quite a period of time, but eventually he made it in and took a naturalization course so he could speak some English. That's always helpful. I mean, we don't have an obligation to speak the language of the people that are coming in. They want to be Americans. They need to speak English. Okay. So now I don't want to sound too hardcore about it. We're going to get to in a moment what I think is a sensible way to do it. There is no way. I mean, we've had a surge now. Let's just call it 10 million that are documented asylum seekers. We know for a fact 55% will not even show up for their hearing. And we know for a fact out of the other 45% that show up, only 10% will be accepted. So now out of the 55 that didn't and the 45 that did, that's less than 5%. Throw in 2 million gotaways. Okay, we have no idea about the gotaways because our agents and everybody are too busy changing diapers and taking care of the ones that they're processing. And the gotaways, they use it as an opportunity just to come across. And we can assume if they're gotaways that they don't want to have any encounter with border patrol. We can't assume more than that. We don't know that they're criminals. We don't know much about them. But the cartel involvement is huge. We encounter many people that are asylum seekers that are mimicking the same speech and are wearing bracelets from the cartels. They've paid cartels. There's talk that Chinese are paying, which are much more money than South Americans. Middle class Chinese are paying up to $20,000, $30,000. We're going to talk about that more when we get to China in 2 weeks. And the Chinese economy is having difficulties. There are very many coming over, but they're not all unknown to the CCP either. You can't be totally ignorant. Think the CCP, which controls everything, is not
Well,
aware.
no, nobody's unknown to the CCP
There you
there
go.
at all. I
And
mean, that's just
that's
but again, if green card, like I said, we have the lowest green card approval rate ever and a multi-decade backlog. And as with regulation, the more you regulate something and
asylum.
prevent it,
We have to.
you will try and find any way to get in. The most convenient way to get in. What is the easiest way? Well, let's go to the border and try and walk in. I'll take my chances that way because it's going to take me 15 years to legally make it over. And by the way, our green card approval rate today is around 2%. 2%, which is a historical low. A century ago is 98% before 1924.
As long as this asylum, just as you said, as long as this asylum joke, and the Democrats try now to limit it to 5,000 a day, it's still they're lying. They're coming to the border, whether it's
I don't
5,000
think
or
it's enough.
50,000, and they're seeking
Right.
asylum because they know they can get in, they can get money from the government, they can get flown to a city, a sanctuary city, and they don't have to show up for their hearing, which could be out 3 or 4 years from now. So they're going to keep using asylum no matter if we limit it to 5,000 or 50,000, people are going to keep using it. It's a farce. and it's what's creating the problem. And the Dems tried. Biden apparently woke up from his 3-year sleep and decided now with an election coming, he better deal with the border. Well, what they came up with was a 5,000 person in a day seeking asylum. They're not. So let me just, we don't want to get too negative, and there are areas that Ishmael and I agree. So let me just go over my 4 points of what needs to happen, I think. And first of all, first and foremost, the political class, Homeland Security, and immigration don't have the manpower to monitor the surge in alien aspirants to America. We should consider promptly starting a sponsorship program of the business community. Now, sponsor would be, as Ishmael says, and that can change. If we recess, that guy looking for labor isn't going to be looking. Okay, believe me. and I think we're slowing now. I'm not at all saying we're going to recess, but we are slowing. So, but the sponsor would need a worker. He would fill out a form with the worker. They would both sign the form and they would submit it to the INS, the boss and the employee, and he would agree to sponsor him. Now, that what does sponsorship entail? Well, sponsorship could entail helping the man or his family find a place to live. It could entail going to any hearing with him. It's going to be a responsibility, but it's best handled by an employer because they have a working relationship than it is the INS, where you don't have the bodies, the government bodies to do it, and you don't know where they go. During that period of sponsorship, and I suggest it should be, 3 to 5 years, an employee could leave one job and become sponsored by another business person. So there should be a record with minor interruptions, but not with like a year of interruptions, but there should be a record at the INS of our aspirant. Aspirant is a person aspiring to become a citizen as he went from job to job, if that be the case. He might just stay in the same job. My dad stayed at the same job for 4 years till he became a citizen. And he had help from his boss for that period of time. So that way, you would be, that new person would be building up a record. I mean, it's not a record as much as they would be working and they would be logging time in America.
Now, would this be different from the current H-1B system that exists today?
Different. First of all, forget asylum. If
I'm talking about H-1B, which is employer sponsorship that you're talking about here. I mean, forget asylum. H-1B is that visa that primarily is used by Indians, seemingly. They're all on H-1Bs to work in Silicon Valley. So I'm just trying to highlight the differences between the
and I don't know the detail of what work permit they're on. But I'm suggesting a way where possibly the employer might even have a little more responsibility than he presently does. And he would be in a position, almost a parental position, even though they're both adults, of overseeing his aspirant, his person that wants to become a citizen. So it would be more than just merely an employment. But that, from the person's point of view, as long as they kept on the straight and narrow, and they didn't, rape a woman and kill a person or on and on.
Get a speeding ticket, honestly. I mean, I think you need to have a real high set of
rules. They would be promised at the end of the road, they would be a citizen. Now, this gets into the whole problem with sanctuary cities. Sanctuary cities, you just show up. You don't even have to speak English. You can go and get a driver's license without any documentation, without even an electric bill. And then once you have a driver's license, you can go and vote. You get into the voter scheme and you can go and vote. So you have aliens that may be working, may not be working, but they do get driver's licenses and they're working doing something or sporadically working. And you cloud up, you don't have that simple path of sponsorship. You don't have it. And sanctuary cities, in my opinion, should just be cut off from federal funding. Totally. Starting with California. The reason Gavin Newsom is jumping up and down, because he knows if Biden gets in, Biden will pay his $78 billion that he's in debt, that he's run up. Other than that, California is going to sink right into the sea. So that's why he's pushing Biden so much. He knows the Dems will pay his debt. And we should not have that response. We're paying enough debts, enough bills. We're technically broke. We're printing money to live right now, the country is, and we need to wake up to that. So basically, the sponsorship program would be a way for an alien aspirant who was needed to come and work for somebody. It would work two ways. If people needed individuals, they can inform the INS. We need people to do landscaping, as you said, or we need a tech genius, or whatever, and the INS could connect them, because the INS is on the border, not only on the border with people, but as Ismail said, there are tons of people in foreign countries that are trying to go through the process to come into the country to work or go to school. But that would be an automatic if someone in the country said, hey, I need some help doing what I'm doing. And that would be an automatic. And so it would work two ways. The third thing, and this is key to the whole process working, you have to recognize that America's big heart in saying to the world, asylum seekers are welcome, is being abused. It's being abused by 96.5% of everyone that crosses the border. 96, that tells you something. So real simply, if your life is being threatened politically, don't country hop 15 countries to get here. Go to one country and tell them your life's being threatened. In other words, let's impose a border rule on asylum seekers. Now, there will be an exception to it. If we ever get in positions like we were in Afghanistan, where you have people helping us do what the heck we were doing over there, then you have an obligation, you're leaving, you have an obligation to let them come with you or they'll be killed. I mean, there's still people being killed that were left in Afghanistan that were nothing but trying to help America. Okay, so that would be the exception. Other than that, if your life is being threatened, tell the whole world, don't come to the border and tell us that. We're not going to be impressed. You're not going to get in. Go to the next country. And we know in Mexico who's being threatened and who isn't. So don't get too, we do get an awful lot of inflow from Mexico itself. But Venezuela, go to the next country, on and on and on. And if you impose that policy, you have shut the border down. Now, also, you need to know who's crossing. There's too much going on with fentanyl, drugs, running kids in prostitution. You need to know who's crossing. So the border needs to, at least in the short term, to all these other 3 points, to the sponsorship takes hold, you need to close it. You need to close the border, because you'll open.
How do you close it?
You close it anyway. I don't care if you do it robotically. It needs to be closed. Nobody needs to cross. I don't care if you do
and
lasers,
to be clear,
nobody needs to cross. And there's not an open border. You cannot have a sovereign country with an open border.
Are you saying, well, and I want to be very clear on this point, you're saying nobody that goes through formal legal means, for lack of a better term? Because when I hear a closed border, it is nobody's getting in for any reason whatsoever.
Listen, that's the way they've
nobody gets
in.
Nobody.
You're opening.
So that would mean
through sponsorship.
Are you cutting off tourists? Are you cutting off tourists and other things like that?
No, stop it right away. This is out of control. you're going to see the repercussions from what's happened in this 3 years are going to go on for 3 more years, and they're not going to be good. That's my prediction. But with sponsorship, you're opening up that avenue that you say is impassable. Because a guy tells the INS, I want 3 people, they can bring them in right away. Okay. But they're not coming in because their life's in danger. They're coming in to work for this guy.
Yep.
And they're getting green cards, and they're starting a process of monitoring. Now, there may be a period that, look, you have to look into criminality, especially with what's happening in Venezuela right now and other countries when they're dumping out their prisons. Okay, you just can't have a blanket open border. So you can do it as quickly as you can, but if a person passes a criminal test in their own country, let them in. Okay, plus you have that period of sponsorship where you have that paternal relationship with the boss overseeing them. The boss is responsible to a degree. I mean, if something happens, they're going to go to the boss too. Well, your guy just did this, you know. So you have that responsibility. You can't leave it to government. We don't have the money to hire enough people in government to do it. And then you're going to have an immediate way to get people you need into the country after a criminal.
Now, would you have today there's a 65,000 person cap on H-1B visas, for example. And again, it's a program I know very well, and it is a sponsorship program in similar vein you're describing. Would you propose a cap on the number of workers that can come in?
The only cap I would propose, I wouldn't propose a cap. I would let the thing open, leave the thing open. The problem is our economy goes up and down. And,
sure. Yeah.
We tend to average unemployments. We've been in a weird, the period you're talking about is a very brief period in my life, the last 3 years. And there have been shortages and there has been an explosion of that. But this is not, if you take a 20-year period, if you just take this century, you can go back to 08, 09, shit, there was 9% unemployment. Okay. These were American
Yeah. I mean,
states.
I'd say that's almost the opposite extreme to your point. But my point would be, in that case, and I think we both agree on it, if you're not needed anymore, you have to leave. And I know cases of that,
well,
especially in the tech industry, in the tech industry where H-1B,
are they going to be
they're out of here?
Or are they going to, this group
H-1B, yep, H-1B visas. And again, I know this in particular is folks who have been laid off from a Google or a Facebook or a Twitter, name your tech. They've got 90 days to find a new job before they're out.
Well, you see, 90 days is fair. 90 days is fair. Technology is very extensive. And if they've got talent and everything, they can find it. And they would continue with the new employer. That's a fair thing.
And that's what happens today. 90 days, you leave.
You know, I'd like to think when they bring them over, they're here if they stay the course. And by that, I mean, if they don't go off, stay on the straight and narrow.
Absolutely.
Don't go off track, that they're going to want to have a shot to being citizens. Okay. So that's the program I'm talking about. But there's so many other areas that are on fire today, particularly the family and all the abortions and the psychiatric problems that families are having. And the whole school system in many areas is just defunct, you know, with emphasis on DEI and against merit. And which is the first time really in my life I've seen it. I saw it in college. I know there were certain communist professors I had, but I never thought it would become this extensive throughout the whole system. And the systems accommodated it. See, the day that your dad and my dad came, there wasn't this extensive welfare system in America that they didn't come for any of that. They came here for a job, a living, to have a family, and to live the American dream. And they did, okay? And many do. The vast majority do. But today, you have twists to it that didn't exist. The whole thing with cartel involvement and narcotics involvement and young children coming across is something that is very specific to what's going on today and didn't occur in the past. The whole thing of coming across just the southern border is also to the degree it's happening. It's never happened like this in what's happened in the last 3 years, and it's all due to asylum. Okay, so to sum up, we're saying one, start a sponsorship program. Let the employers tell the INS, we need workers. And let the employer understand that he has a responsibility that goes beyond just being the employer when he brings an alien aspirant, a person aspiring to be a citizen to America. Number two, it works two ways. If they're here, they can't find a job and they've tried for a period of time, they should not have the right to go to be a citizen. They're not yet a citizen. Okay. We want them to be a citizen, but they should not have the right to start going into welfare. I mean, there are 2 or 3 hospitals right now, one in Texas that's going bankrupt because of the overflow in the emergency room. They're going bankrupt. To lose these hospitals is going to hurt those municipal areas where they're citizens. And this has been something, it's another a beauty of America. Nowhere in the world except America can you walk in an emergency room and be treated. Nowhere in the world. Okay, only here. So again, there must be certain carve outs, but at least you're satisfying the employment need in America by allowing them to come in and giving them a green card. Does that mean they can vote? No, they're not citizens, not yet. you know and I believe strongly. My dad had to take it. I'm not sure about Ishmael's dad, but my dad was uneducated. Well, he spoke 4 languages, but he had no formal education, and he took a naturalization course, and they teach you basics about how to keep
They
protecting,
had to do it. My parents had to do it too.
what to do, because these
Yep.
people don't know. They're clueless, and basic things and what America's about. And so after you finish that, after you finish your sponsorship programs on your green card in a certain period of time, 3 to 4 years, maybe up to 5, you're allowed to become a citizen. And that way you get rid of this whole farcical thing on the southern border where everybody's coming in claiming their lives are at risk. Not, it's a lie just to get entry. They're using up all our resources. They're being dishonest. I'm not blaming the immigrants. I'm blaming our country for having such a stupid policy for so long. And now that the Democrats want to change it by doing what? By limiting the number of people that lie? No. Let's go to the truth. Let's go to the truth. Their lives aren't in danger. They're not seeking asylum. They want a shot in America. Do we have people here that need them? Let's just connect the two and have that boss, hey, come down to the border and pick them up and take them wherever he needs to take them. We don't have to fund them to sanctuary cities where they're doing what? They're running up bills in bankrupt cities. For what? Okay. And once that's implemented and it's known, you don't have a president inviting everybody to come, which Biden did. And they tell you coming across the border that was the case. You have some sanity. And in the short term, close down the border. We have too many narcos from South America, too many cartels doing too much and making too much money. So you close it down, but you start the program simultaneously. So who's to say you don't have needs for workers anywhere? You probably have some needs, like Ishmael said, right in Texas. Well, then you bring them in,
I could
but you
find
don't.
people many jobs.
What we're
It
doing
wouldn't take me
now,
very long.
what we're doing now
Well,
is
what we're
not
doing
going to work.
now is, here's my issue with what we're doing now, because I agree with all these ideas, is number one, on purpose, and this is where I think the a lot of the arguments that are made against immigration are disingenuous, right? I think your arguments are very sincere in that we have to know and we have to do it the right way. I
They're
do
not.
think fundamentally, I do think fundamentally, because this is not a hard fix to me either. I agree with you on all of that. You actually have to have a system that efficiently does this. Again, this past year, the fewest green card approvals in history, 3%. 3% of applicants were approved. So if you have a system like that, where it takes you 12 to 15 years to get to the approval stage, to get approved, and if you have caps on the H-1B program, for example, 65,000 people a year, we're saying, well, yes, we want you to come legally, but actually we don't because it is impossible to do it legally.
Well,
and to me, that's the frustrating thing. You
you're
have to
wrong.
make that system much easier to do in a much shorter amount of time. It should not take someone a decade to get over here.
I can't imagine us taking individuals that want to work when we don't have any work. So you have to transfer it to the employers, not the INS. And let the INS be the intermediary of connecting.
Absolutely.
And that's it.
Absolutely.
Get it started.
Completely agree.
Yeah. But you have to
there has to be a processing
asylum farce that's allowing all this stuff to come in on the border, and we don't know what's going on. You have to know during that period, or just immediately, if the person checks out fairly honestly, immediately after, you have to check their criminality. You have to know who you're letting in. Well, people, that's about does it for today. And our sponsorship suggestion for America, we haven't heard it from anyone else. And we hope we're contributing something there. Next week, we're going to go to fatal gifts. By whom? By the government. We're going to talk about that. The week after will be with the CCP in China, in Mexico. So you have a blessed week. Thank you for watching. And we'll look forward to seeing you next Friday at 4 o'clock. Have a blessed week. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful week.